My presentation is going to be quite pragmatic and practical. I don't have any pictures or particularly any facts to wow you, because I'm very much coming at this from a business perspective. So part of the issue with the whole sustainability debate is it's too enormous for a lot of people to get. And generally, when things are enormous, they become scary and people disengage. So you may remember a couple of years ago that the government had an advertising campaign around climate change, and it showed puppies drowning and it showed traffic cones in dry riverbeds. And then they wondered why people just turned off and didn't get it. Well, because it either left people completely disinterested or it scared them half to death. And they had no way, there was no hook for them to engage with that agenda. From my perspective, I think the three previous speakers have given, certainly me, some food for thought in terms of how we portray the concept of sustainability. But what it all comes back down to is that sustainable development and growth needs to sit alongside economic prosperity. And if that doesn't happen, none of the brave new world that we've talked about today is going to happen. So part of my job and part of what I do with businesses is to try and turn a lot of this great stuff into practical realities for them. Because there are very few far-sighted businesses. There are some. I would have loved to have been in the boardroom the day that whoever it was went into the board of Marks and Spencer's and said, I'd like to start charging for carrier bags. And of course, where has that come from? Well, it's got Plan A, and we all know about the change that that has made. But there are very few organisations who either take the time to understand the agenda or indeed are big enough to make such a fundamental move as Marks and Spencer's have done with Plan A. So very practical over the next few minutes. Sustainability is important to business for 4 key reasons in my experience. The first one is bottom line. Second is their reputation. The third is the opportunity that that brings them. And the fourth is adaptation. And what I mean by adaptation is future business resilience. So if I'm the managing director of IBM, am I going to have a business in 20, 30 years' time? Or is all of the product that I'm selling about to become defunct? What does bottom line mean? Well, again, bringing it back down to really practical terms, in Yorkshire and Humber, there is £550 million worth of money available here today for SMEs to save off their bottom line. Most of that is at no cost. Some of it is at very low cost that returns within a year. So why aren't they doing it? We're in the biggest recession that most of us have ever known. There are SMEs going out of business on a daily basis. This is a way for them to save money. And this isn't rocket science. This is really simple stuff, whether it's lagging a pipe, whether it's insulating a roof space, whether it's even measuring. It's amazing how many businesses I speak to who don't even know how much energy they use or haven't even considered the fact that they need to monitor their energy. And when they do, lo and behold, oh my goodness, our boiler's on every weekend, our boiler's on every bank holiday. Simple things like that can make such an enormous difference. And those savings are available today. And tangible savings like that is what turns businesses onto the whole concept of sustainability. And if you get them with cost savings like that, then you can start to introduce the broader message and turn them into socially responsible businesses. The cost of carbon is an interesting one. A few years ago, we all thought the cost of carbon was going to be an enormous driver in terms of carbon trading and making businesses more responsible. And that really hasn't happened for a number of reasons. Equally, government legislation such as the carbon reduction commitment that we thought would penalise poor performers and have them in, completely open league tables has just turned into a very complicated tax. It hasn't really done what it set out to do. But actually, the cost of carbon will increase and will become an economic driver and will be something that organisations who are large carbon creators really have to consider. And organisations who are carbon savers, or carbon eaters even in some situations, can see a whole new line of income available for them. There are opportunities for super profits within the low carbon sector, whether that's in innovation, whether that's in energy generation, whether that's in turning something like waste, which a lot of organisations see as an issue, and turning it on its head and turning it into a real income stream or an opportunity. And a few organisations are really seeing the opportunity here. We do some work with Skanska, who are probably the most sustainable construction company in the UK at the moment, who recognise that by investing in their supply chain to deliver innovative products, it enables them to keep that market lead and that credibility and that brand differentiation. But it also gives them the opportunity to make a lot of money as well. In terms of the final thing on bottom line, some of you may have come across a report that was commissioned recently, which was classified as being a mini Stern for Leeds City region. Professor Andy Gouldston at Leeds University actually produced that. An absolutely amazing piece of work, and what it does for the first time is take a whole range of resource efficiency improvements and renewable energy and income generating areas and measure the carbon benefit and the economic benefit of them so you can see them compared side by side. And that's what we need to do, and that's what businesses need to do. That's what I do every day of my working life. Does it save carbon and does it save or make money? And if the answer to both of those is yes, you should do it. If the answer to either of those is no, you shouldn't do it because it's not sustainable business practice at the moment. Reputation is an enormous issue. We all know that the UK has got globally and legally binding carbon reduction targets, which we are, and I'm sure Jamie would agree with me here, miles away from achieving. So there's a real prerequisite to work quickly. I talked about the carbon reduction commitment and the fact that some of the levers that government can use, and this goes back to the concept of, do we legislate to improve performance or do we engender hearts and minds? It isn't quite working because the problem with legislation is it deals with one problem and causes another. So take carbon tax as an example. It reduces carbon in the UK, but for an exporter, it actually potentially makes their export market unsustainable because other companies who they're competing with aren't charging that carbon tax. So it's like that game where you bash the moles at the fairground and as soon as they've all gone back in their holes, they all pop up again. It's really difficult to get the right balance. The other thing around reputation I want to mention now is this concept of a carbon neutral status and the dreadful word carbon offsetting. And this was, a few years ago, a lot of organisations went out there and said, we're carbon neutral, look at us. And when people did look at them, they found out that actually they'd offset their carbon. It's very easy to buy a bit of rainforest if you've got a lot of money and say, oh, look at us, we're great, we're preserving this rainforest, when actually what they're not doing is focusing on their own operation and making it as carbon efficient as it can be. This is going to become an increasingly big driver for UK PLC, and I agree completely with what Lucy said about global brands, that actually people will begin to, in the future, make buying decisions based on the carbon reputation of businesses. I don't think they do it now, but they will do as we go throughout the next 5, 10, 15 years. So the organisations that embrace it now and change their business models will be right at the front of that pack. There is an enormous opportunity in carbon. It's not all about, losing Lincolnshire. Some people would say that's not an issue. But actually, if you look at the adaptation models, Lincolnshire will disappear at some point because it's so low. It's not about that. It's about focusing on what opportunities there are commercially and how that has a corresponding impact on sustainability. That's new innovative product lines and innovation. I mean, we've championed a product recently that's a brick, and for all intents and purposes, it looks just like a brick. It's made of poo. I love it. It's absolutely fantastic. But actually, that's the type of on-its-head innovation that we want to encourage our businesses to do. Turn something that is the most, waste and turn it into something that you can use for building homes. And that is absolutely fantastic. I could give you oodles of examples around innovations such as that. But it's a matter of fostering it and engendering it, putting the right level of support in at the right time in the right way to enable great little innovations like that to become commercialised and become mainstream products. It is around first mover advantage, and the businesses who do this first will take maximum advantage out of this. You take Croda as a chemical company. You could argue that they probably would be one of the most least carbon-friendly organisations, but their whole brand is based on how carbon efficient they are. You go to their site in the Humber, the first thing you see are the turbines, the first thing you see are the photovoltaics. And that's not just veneer, they're actually fundamentally changing their business and recognising that they're not a carbon-friendly business, but they'll do their damnedest to make sure that they manage their carbon as effectively as they can. And that gives them huge opportunities in terms of their supply chain when they're working with cosmetics and toiletries organisations. And increasingly, stakeholders, whether they be shareholders or trustees or whoever, customers, and most importantly, employees will start to make decisions about where they work, who they buy from, and who they want to be associated with regards to the carbon credentials of businesses, which again is an economic driver for them to change. Somebody once said to me that Jonathan Wild, who until recently ran Betty's and Taylor's of Harrogate, was a carbon philanthropist. And I said, no, he's not. He's just a very savvy businessman, because what does he sell? He sells tea, he sells coffee, he sells chocolate. Those three products are going to disappear in 30, 40 years' time if we don't do something now. So he's just protecting his future. And that, I suppose, is the essence of what I'm talking about today. It's not about philanthropy. It's not about painting this big picture. It's about being able to take that picture and turn it into reality for businesses. They can engage with it and get behind it. And this takes me back to adaptation. For businesses, it's all around business risk. And why would businesses be interested in adaptation? Well, we did a big piece of work for Asda a few years ago around understanding the risks in their supply chain. You know, so you start to take a product like chocolate and say, in 50 years' time, will you be able to buy a bar of chocolate? Well, that's a really interesting question. And at the moment, you probably would say, well, no, because you just can't move the chocolate production to England. You know, it's not like growing wine. You know, cocoa beans need very certain climatic conditions to grow. So basic things like that. And it's around, for me, not focusing on the puppies drowning and the riverbeds being dried up, but actually saying, well, do you want to keep eating chocolate and drinking a cup of coffee? Because actually, if you do, you really need to engage with this. And people get that, and people engage with it. And businesses understand that in order to sell that product in the future, they need to do something now. So in summary, from my perspective, and I do this day in, day out, carbon savings and economic value have to go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. But Yorkshire is exceptionally well placed to take advantage of all of this. I don't know how many of you are aware, but some of the most fantastic carbon innovations and carbon opportunities are happening right on your doorstep. The Yorkshire Carbon Capture and Storage Project, it has the potential to be the largest carbon capture and storage project of its type in the world. That's happening here in Yorkshire. Why? Because we have a unique combination of geography and geology. The geology is the southern North Sea and the saline aquifer infrastructure and the depleted gas fields. The geography is that most of the largest emitters in the UK sit along the M62 corridor. So the idea of building an infrastructure network isn't too difficult to get to. And that project in itself could reduce the UK's carbon emissions by 10%, create over 50,000 new jobs, and bring in inward investment to the Yorkshire region of around about £5 to £6 billion. So who says there isn't an economic opportunity in engaging with low carbon and sustainability? I certainly think that there really is, and businesses really need to wake up to that fact and embrace it, and that's what's going to deliver some of the behaviour change that we need to make a difference. Thank you.